Good morning, Periscope. Happy Thursday, day before Friday. Woohoo! Hope everyone is having an awesome week so far. Thank you for choosing to join Sunrise Scope this morning. I hope you guys have been enjoying this week's series about overcoming failure or avoiding failure. Good morning. Thank you guys so much for joining. Thank you for the hearts. Good morning. Hello. Hey, Lexi Fit. Hey, Smiles. Hey, Kim. Good morning. Thank you for joining. Hey, good morning, Artina. Good morning, Tracy. Good morning, Chestnut. Good morning, Nishia. Good morning. Good morning from Arkansas, Maryland. Hey, good morning, Nikki. Good morning, Queen. Stephanie Hyde. Hey, Liz. Good morning. Mickey, Drea, Michelle, Film Writer, Renee, D2. Good morning. Thank you guys so much for joining. Welcome to today's Sunrise Scope. We've been talking about how to avoid failure all week. So today I want to talk about, I think, one of the biggest ways that failure comes to try to overtake us. And I believe that that is through distraction, because if we can get distracted, what happens is that we fail to put our best foot forward, and we fail to put our full energy forward, and we fail to put our full capabilities forward. So today I want to talk about distraction, what types of distraction try to overtake us, and how we can be overcomers when it comes to distraction to make sure that we are avoiding failure or avoiding stagnation through being distracted. So the first thing I want to do is just go ahead and define distraction. So basically a distraction is this: a thing that prevents someone from giving full attention to something else. So basically distraction is robbing you of being able to give your full attention, from being able to give your full energy, from being able to give your full best, because you are distracted by something else. It's a synonym with diversion. It's an interruption. It's a disturbance, an interference, or a hindrance. It's even defined as an extreme agitation of the mind and emotions. So basically what diversion comes to do and how it comes to attack us is by this. Diversion comes to divert our attention and to keep us from being able to put our full 100%, our full energy forward into our goals, into our dreams, and into who we were created to be. And this is why so many people see stagnation, not even because they're necessarily failing, not even because they're in sin, not even because they're doing something wrong, but simply because they're so distracted, they are unable to put their full 100% or their full foot forward to become who they were called to be, or to be able to focus on their identity, or to be able to focus on their purpose, or to be able to focus on their goals. I think one of the biggest ways that I want to talk about distraction first, the number one thing I think we get distracted by is worry. Worry is one of our greatest distractions, along with idolatry, money, wealth, and fame. So I want to just go ahead and give a scripture. Matthew 6:24 through 25 says this: no one can serve two masters. So right there we see that you cannot focus on two things, that you cannot give yourself fully 100% to two things. So no one can serve two masters, for he will either hate the one and love the other, or will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon, or money, possessions, fame, status, or whatever it is that is valued more than the Lord. Therefore, I tell you, stop being worried or anxious, perpetually uneasy or distracted, as the Amplified Version says, about your life, as to what you will eat or what you will drink, about your body or what you will wear. Is life not more than food, and the body not more than clothing? So right there we see that literally the Amplified Version uses the word distracted, and distractions that it lists are possessions, fame, status, being uneasy, being worrisome, worrying about what you eat, worrying about what you're going to drink, worrying about what you wear. So I think that although, people may not see worry as a sin, and people may not see worry as failure, unfortunately what worry does when we give in to being worried, it distracts us from being able to focus on what we do have now. It distracts us from being able to put our full energy and full focus into moving forward. So worry is actually a distraction. Another distraction that Matthew lists is possession, fame, and status. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in the ideas of attaining possessions, attaining fame, attaining status, that these truly become a hindrance and become a distraction to what it is that we should be doing. And what happens is, I want to go ahead and share one more scripture. Mark 4:18 through 19 says this: the seed that fell among the thorns represents others who hear God's word, but all too quickly The message is crowded out by the worries of the life, the lure of wealth, the desire for other things, and no fruit is produced. So right there we see that distraction and worry keep us from producing fruit, keep us from being successful, and keep us from producing at the rate to which God has called us to. Whether we may read the Word of God, we may hear the Word of God, we may know what we're called to do, but it says that the worries of this life, the lure of wealth, and the desire for other things come in, overtake that seed, and then no fruit is produced. So it is impossible to produce fruit, or at least to produce at the rate we were called to produce, when we are distracted. Another thing besides, money or wealth or fame, sometimes we think that's the end all be all to the goals that we have. But the thing is that people get money, they get fame, they get wealth, and they still are not happy. And as proof of this, you could just take 10 minutes and study the suicide rate in Hollywood. So some of these people who we see have the most wealth, have the most fame, have the most money, have the most cars, have the most houses, have the nicest clothes, still are not happy, fulfilled people, and still have one of the highest suicide rates out of any population of people in the world. Another thing that really comes to distract us is the idea of people and the idea of acceptance. And the scripture I want to share in reference to that is Galatians 1:10. And it says am I now trying to win the favor and approval of men or of God? Or am I seeking to please someone? If I were still trying to be popular with men, I would not be able to be a servant of Christ. So right there it says, what are the motives behind what you're doing? What are the motives behind your goals? Are you trying to seek the approval of man? Are you trying to seek the favor of man, the acceptance of man? What we have to understand is that acceptance and approval and the fear of being, rejected, the fear of not being accepted is a distraction to our purpose. Because what happens, when we so much desire the acceptance of people, so much desire fame and popularity and many followers, is that we will begin to sell out and do whatever will make us popular. So therefore we become controlled not by our goals, not by God, not by our identity, and not by who we were called to be, but we become controlled by the reactions of other people. So when people show us they like something, when we get more followers, when people show us acceptance, we'll continue to do those things that they show us we gain acceptance for. And what this causes us to do is this causes us to become distracted from what it really is that we're supposed to be able to do, and causes us even to sell out from being the best us and giving people what we were created to give, the solution we were created to be, because now we're so obsessed with serving and a bondservant and slave to the acceptance of people that we're no longer serving God, no longer serving our calling, no longer serving our purpose, because our goal at the end of the day is to have the most followers. Our goal at the end of the day is to find acceptance. Our goal at the end of the day is to make people like us. So we become so obsessed with people liking us. We become so obsessed with the idea of acceptance that we now are serving acceptance. We now are serving people, and therefore cannot be a servant of Christ. And this has distracted us from what we truly were called to be. An example I like to use when talking about, how we really have to let go of acceptance to accomplish what it is we've been called to accomplish is Noah. When God gave Noah the command to build the ark, I'm sure that many people thought he was crazy. I'm sure that many people didn't believe him, didn't understand him. I even bet so many people within his family thought he was crazy. Okay, you're building this giant boat, this giant ark about this flood that you keep saying is going to come, but I don't even see the rain. I don't even see a drop of water. But what if Noah would have been so obsessed with the acceptance of people, or being liked by people, or being understood by people, or appreciated by people, that he failed to build the ark because other people didn't understand, didn't agree, didn't like it, and didn't accept it. So we have to understand there comes a point in our life, where we have to be faithful to God and faithful to our calling, and we cannot be distracted by what other people think, whether people accept us or not, whether people agree with us or not, because when we become so obsessed with that, we will eventually sell out when it comes to our calling, when it comes to our purpose, when it comes to our goals, when it comes to our dreams. 1 Corinthians 7:35 says this, I am saying this for your benefit, not to place restrictions on you. I want you to do whatever will help you serve the Lord best with as few distractions as possible. So right there we see, that the way to best serve the Lord, the way to best, walk in our purpose, walk in our destiny, and walk in who we were called to be is with as few distractions as possible. So right there we see that distractions inhibit us from being able to walk and serve the Lord as best as we can and be the best people that we were able to be. Another thing I think that really holds us back and is a huge distraction is fear. And I think this distraction is such a big one. Matthew 14:28 says this, and this is about the story of Peter. And it says, so Peter got out of the boat and started walking on the water and came to Jesus. But when he noticed, so notice that when Peter got out of the boat and was walking on the water, his eyes were on Jesus. So he was doing something that many would consider impossible. He was doing a miracle. He was walking, in the fullness of his potential at that moment. So what you have to understand is he had his eyes on Jesus. And now listen to this next part. But when he noticed the strong wind, so look right there, he shifted his eyes, he shifted his perspective from God to the distractions. He looked to the left and to the right, and he noticed, or another word for noticed, you need what to look at or to peer at. When he noticed the strong wind, what happened? He was frightened. And what was the result of him being frightened and having his eyes on that distracting wind? It says he began to sink and then shouted, Lord, save me. So right there we see that as Peter was doing one of the greatest miracles recorded in the Bible, literally walking on water, he was able to only do that because he had his eyes on Jesus and was not distracted by the spirit of fear, was not distracted by the fears of life, was not distracted by the waves of life, was not being tossed to and fro by them, and was not being double-minded. But we see that as soon as Peter, it says, but when he noticed the strong wind, so as soon as he gave in to that distraction, and what was the result of that distraction? He was frightened. So as soon as he gave into that distraction, what happened was he became fearful and he began to sink. And this is exactly what happens to us. If we really want to fulfill the dreams, the impossible things, the miracles, the things that God has created us to do, if we want to see our goals come true, our businesses grow, whatever it may be, and we're believing God for the impossible, we have to keep our eyes on him. Because the moment that we shift our eyes onto our distractions, what happens is that fear comes in, and fear will keep us from being able to walk in the fullness of our purpose, the fullness of our destiny, and the fullness of who we were called to be. So, and this fear can manifest itself in so many different ways, whether this fear is the fear of failure. So I think for Peter in that moment, when he saw the winds, he became fearful of drowning or fearful of failing at walking on the water. But what happens is when he focused on fear, he gave life to that thing, and fear was able to overtake him and make him sink. So I think that one of the biggest distractions when it comes to accomplishing our goals, when it comes to being the fullness of who we were called to be, is the fear of failure. So many people, are so afraid to fail that they never launch out, they never step forward, and they never have those moments of walking on water, those water walking moments, because they allow fear to distract them. And fear will come in and tell you lies, will tell you lies about who you are, will tell you lies about what's going to happen. And the greatest thing about fear is that fear, it's really so silly, because it makes you fear things that have not even yet happened. Most of the time when we're fearing failure, it's not because we're already in the failure, it's because we're fearing the idea of possibly failing. So fear is such a liar, because it's got a grip on us to make us believe something about the future and make us so fearful of what might happen, not even something that's already happened, that it keeps us stagnated just simply with the fear of something. So, I think this is one of the devil's most powerful ways to stagnate us. He doesn't even have to cause anything to actually happen. He just makes us fear the idea of something happening, and then we stagnate. So we really have to overcome fear, because fear is not real, and fear is just false evidence appearing real. I know a lot of people have probably heard that, but that's exactly what fear is. It's false evidence appearing real, or making itself look to be real, or convincing you that there's a chance that it's going to happen, and that the chance that it may happen, is worth you not launching out. But it truly is not. Another fear I think really holds us back, like we were just talking about, is the fear of rejection. We're so afraid that people won't like what we're going to do, that people won't support us, that people won't follow us, that people won't, whatever it may be, give us their acceptance or their approval. So we stay distracted by the fear of rejection and aren't able to launch out and move forward. And that truly holds us back from accomplishing at the rate to which we were called to, and keeps us in this stagnation and keeps us in this failure. Another thing is that people are afraid of the fear of abandonment. So they're afraid that if they truly become who they were called to be, if they truly start walking in truth, if they truly start following their dreams, that those around them may abandon them. If they trust people, they may abandon them. So even the fear of abandonment will hold us back. We talked about last week how important community is, how important relationships are, how important it is to have people around you. But if you constantly struggle with the fear of abandonment and don't allow people, to help you, don't allow people to walk in community with you, don't allow people to walk in relationship with you, what happens is that fear of abandonment keeps you from the right community, keeps you from the right mentors, keeps you from the right accountability you need to be able to walk forward. So I think fear is one of the biggest things that tries to hold us back. And from this fear, what is produced is lies. And I think these lies that we allow to speak to us, is another thing that holds us back, keeps us stagnated, and keeps us from seeing a great amount of success and causes us to fail. John 8:44 says this, when speaking about the devil, it says, "He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks what is natural to him, for he is a liar and the father of lies and half-truths." So right there we see, one of the devil's biggest, ways he comes to attack us is through lies. And when we believe these lies distract us from the truth. And God is the way, the truth, and the life. So we have to understand that one of the things the devil wants to do to stagnate us and from keeping us from seeing true success is to get us to believe lies about ourselves. So he'll come in and tell you these lies. And the thing is about these lies is, we've talked about the past and how the devil is not creative. He does not have the ability to create. Only God has the ability to create. So oftentimes these lies that the devil tries to speak to you, whether that is that you're going to fail, whether that is that people don't love you, whether it is that you're stupid, you're dumb, you're unqualified, you're ugly, whatever it may be, it's oftentimes the same lies he's been speaking to you since you were a young child. His lies are redundant. His lies are repetitive. His lies are not insightful. His lies are not creative. And it's often the same lies he's been telling you since your childhood. He does not have the ability to create. Only God has the ability to create. So he comes in with the same repetitive, redundant lies, whatever that may be, tells you lies about who you are, tells you lies about what you're capable of, and therefore is able to distract you from the truth of God. And what this does is this will keep you stagnated and will keep you from being able to walk in the fullness of who you were called to be, in the fullness of your purpose and of the fullness of your destiny, because you're too busy believing lies to be able to be set free. The one thing that lies does is it bonds us and it keeps us a slave. When you believe lies, you become a slave to the devil. You become a slave to the father of lies, because now you've exalted him above God and you're believing what he says about you versus what God says about you. So you can't believe the fullness of who God has called you to be, who he has said you to be, when you're too busy and distracted believing the lies of Satan. So what we must begin to do is understand and even differentiate and discern the lie between the truth. And we have to understand that these lies are not true. We have to throw them off. We have to throw off everything that hinders and begin to believe the truth. Begin to believe who God has called us to be. Because when the devil comes in with lies, for me, one of the biggest lies that I struggle with is that you're going to fail and that no one is going to want to hear what you have to say and that you might as well just give up before you have to experience great failure. But I know that to be a lie, and I know that's something the devil has been speaking to me since I was very young. Just give up. Just quit. Just kill yourself. You don't have anything to offer. Nobody wants to listen to you. That fear of rejection, that fear of abandonment. And what that fear has done is it comes in and tries to rob me of the truth of what God has called me to do and who God has called me to be. But when I believe the truth of who God has called me to be and what he's called me to do, I am empowered to walk in the fullness of that. And I take on a new boldness and am able to walk forward. So we must understand that lies is one of the enemy's biggest tactics when it comes to distracting us from our purpose and distracting us from our destiny. So we must begin to confront these lies and see them for what they are, lies. See fear for what it is, a lie. So we have to understand that these things will not benefit us and that we cannot continue to believe lies if we want to move forward. Another thing, when we stop believing these lies and when we stop being afraid of all these fears, when we decide that we're no longer going to shift our focus to these fears as Peter did, then what will happen is we'll begin to shift our eyes back to God and be able to focus. So, in order to accomplish at a high level, in order to overcome failure, we must focus. So Hebrews 12:1-2 says this: "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that has slowed us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up, and let us run with endurance the race that God has set before us. Verse 2 says this, we do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus. So right there we see that what lies do, that what distractions do, that what fear does is that it slows us down and keeps us from being able to run the race with endurance, to run the race with success, and to run the race the way God has called us to. So the way that we focus is by keeping our eyes on Jesus. You know, when Peter had his eyes on Jesus, he was able to walk on the water. But as soon as he took his eyes off of Jesus and started looking at the wind, allowed that fear to be evoked within him, what happened is he began to sink. So we must throw off everything that hinders us. We must throw off everything, that distracts us. We must fix our eyes on Jesus, and we must focus. Proverbs 4:25 says this, look straight ahead and fix your eyes on what lies before you. So right there we see, distraction tries to keep us looking in the past. Distraction tries to keep us looking at what is currently surrounding us that could keep us, distract us from even keeping us from moving fully forward and fully into our purpose and destiny. So even Proverbs encourages us to keep our eyes forward. I think another way that we become distracted, and I think this is so important, is that we begin to say yes to too many things. And I think in order to avoid distraction, there's some certain things that we have to learn to say no to. We have to understand that we cannot say yes to everything. I think that when something looks good, we automatically assume that it is God. But I think we need to understand to have the discernment between what is good and what is God. So we have to be able to say, hey, this may look good, but this is truly a distraction from what God wants me to do. If people invite you to be a part of 30 different ministries, if people invite you to be a part of, 30 different nonprofit organizations, if people invite you to partner with them in 30 different ministries, whatever that may be, you have to understand that just because something looks good doesn't mean that you should say yes to it. So I think one of the biggest ways that, Satan tries to distract us is by getting us to say yes to things that look good but simply are not God. And this is why we must allow him to direct all of our paths. The Bible says that God guides man's steps. So this is why we must allow God to guide our steps, because if not, we could be distracted even by something that is good. And I know that may be confusing to some people because we see distractions as something that are evil, but as Satan is the father of lies, he's not going to entice you with something that is not the desire of your heart. So you can be enticed, you can be led astray by something that looks good and still is not God. And this is why it is so important to have discernment. This is why it's so important to pray into our decisions. And this is why it is so important to heed the instructions of God even when we don't understand, because his ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. So we have to understand that he knows the plans he has for us. He is not bound by time. He is not bound to only see our current situation. So sometimes God will even tell you to say no to something that may look good because simply it's a distraction from what he truly has for you. And you know what? The biggest temptations are not the ones that come to us, and we can recognize them as a temptation. The biggest temptation and the biggest distraction is the one that comes to us with a pretty red bow on it. The biggest temptation and the biggest distraction is the one that comes to satisfy what it is that we desire, to satisfy what it is that we are longing for. Whether you're a man or a woman and you truly desire a husband or a wife, and a good man or good woman comes to you but simply is not the one, that is a distraction. Whether you're desiring the opportunity to be able to preach, the opportunity to be able to, do what God's called you to do, and you get an opportunity but it's not the right one, that's still not right. Whether that's a promotion on your job or a new opportunity to make more money, that could look like a good thing, but we have to be able to have discernment to identify the difference between a good thing and a God thing. Another thing is that, and I think this is a huge way that people get distracted. I have conversations with people constantly throughout the week where people, I'll ask them, what are your goals? What do you want to accomplish? What is your future? And they'll tell me these huge goals that they have. And then unfortunately, you talk to these same people 6 months from now and they haven't even taken a single step towards their goal. So one way that we can become distracted is we become so overwhelmed by this idea of a big goal that we don't break it down into smaller goals. And if we want to see these bigger goals happen, we have to understand understand that there is importance to taking a small right step every day. You have to be able to measure your goals in a tangible and measurable way to make them happen. You can't just have this big goal. I really believe that we're going to get to the end of 2015, and people are going to begin to reflect on the goals that they set themselves for 2015 and see that the majority of them did not come to pass. And the reason is because we have these big goals that are simply theories, but we don't have smaller goals that break them down and teach us how to put them into practice. There is a gap between theory to practice. So we have to understand that even when we have these big goals, they seem impossible, they seem far away, and they seem far out, but that is simply because we don't take the time to break them down into smaller goals to see how we can begin to accomplish them today. One of my goals and one of my greatest heart's desires is to share the word of God, to share the truth of God, to share kingdom living, and to set people free through sharing the gospel and through preaching. But I understand that I'm just not going to wake up one day with a crowd of thousands of people around me and say, okay, I guess I'll be able to do that today. So what I've done is I'm taking small, short steps every day, doing one of these sunrise scopes every day to smallly and shortly, accomplish these bigger goals of being able to share the principles and truth of God with people. We have to understand, if you want to be an entrepreneur and own a business, somebody's not just going to walk up to you and hand you a business. You have to make small right decisions each day, being a good steward with the money you have now, being a good steward with the time you have now. We cannot have these large, immeasurable, intangible goals and just expect them to happen one day. We have to start if you want to be free from lust, if you want to not care what people think about you anymore in the way that you're not constantly seeking their acceptance, you're not just going to wake up one day and magically have those things come true. You have to make small right decisions each day that result in large change over a period of time. When we think about how even when you think about the ocean and how sand is turned into sand is bigger things that are slowly and surely worn away by the waves day after day. It doesn't just happen overnight, but it's a small thing that as the waves continuously hit them over and over, hit this debris over and over, it's surely but slowly turns into sand. We have to understand that we are not just going to wake up one day and have all these big goals and these big accomplishments done or handed to us. We have to make small right decisions each day that over a long period of time appear as change, but they only are change. Big change occurs through small right decisions every day. So we can't be distracted or overwhelmed by our goals. We have to begin to break them down into small things that we can accomplish each day. And this is one really big thing that I've learned this past year when it comes to accomplishments, and this is one thing I'm really excited to share. And that is in every period in your life and at every time in your life, it's always going to be something. So, we get in these modes and we get in these focuses where we're like, okay, as soon as I'm done with school, I'll do this. As soon as, I'm done dealing with this insurance claim, I'll do this. As soon as I'm out of this relationship, I'll do this. As soon as I don't have this responsibility anymore, I'll do this. As soon as God takes me off of my job, then I'll start to do this. As soon as I have millions of dollars, then I'll start to give to people. But what we have to understand is that there is always going to be a distraction. There's always going to be a challenge. There's always going to be a trial. And there's always going to be something going on in our lives. So we have to understand that we can't allow these things to distract us and keep us from making progress now. Don't put off things tomorrow, what you could do today. We have to understand that if we continually put things off, people who probably had some of these goals for 2015, continually put things off. And what happened is we got to the end of 2015 and nothing happened because, as soon as I'm done planning this, as soon as I'm done handling this, as soon as I'm out of this trial, then I'll start. But what you have to understand is when you say as soon as this is over, as soon as that is over, something else takes its place. And now you're saying as soon as that thing is over. Once thing 2 is over, now here comes thing 3. And you're constantly giving excuses. And that is something I think that is one of the biggest distractions that hinders us and keeps us from walking in the fullness of who we've created to be and in great success is excuses. Excuses, whether that's time. I don't have time. I don't have the money. Well, I'd like to challenge you in this way. I truly believe that every person does what they want to do and spends their money on what is important to them. So I don't ever give we shouldn't give the excuse anymore that we don't have time. As much as possible, I try not to say that because I've become honest with myself and honest with other people. It's not that I don't have the time. I don't want to. Or there are things to me that are more important. So we have to understand that not having the time is not an excuse. Whether you're extremely busy or have a lot of responsibilities, everybody is busy. Even that saying that says you have as many seconds in the day as Beyonce. Now, I'm not promoting Beyonce, the way she lives her life. I'm no shade to her either, but I'm just saying, we have the same amount of seconds in the day as everyone else. So if you continue to allow yourself to use being busy as a distraction and as an excuse, you are enabling yourself to continue to stagnate. You are enabling yourself to never move forward. You are enabling yourself and justifying yourself to stay in the same place you've been for who knows how many months, how many years, and hopefully not how many decades. So we have to begin to get rid of the excuses. It's not that you don't have time, because you make time for what's important to you. Here's a challenge. I would imagine that the majority of people, when they first wake up in the morning, they get on social media, and before they go to bed at night, they get on social media for at least 10 to 15 minutes. So there's 2 times a day. That's 30 minutes right there at 15 minutes. Then I guarantee you probably get on at least 3 more times throughout the day at 10 minutes. So there's 60 minutes right there. So there's an entire hour you could be dedicating to something else just from getting on social media 6 times a day for 10 minutes, or 2 times for 15 minutes and 3 times for 10 minutes. So how much time are you spending on social media? Yeah, it may only be 10 minutes there and 10 minutes here, but what if you were using that time to not be distracted and to be focused on praying? People say, I don't have time to pray. I don't have time to read my word. I don't have time to get to know God. I don't have time to build a business. I don't have time to serve. I don't have time to give money. Well, yes, you do. You have time, because you watch TV shows, whether that's Scandal, How to Get Away with Murder, whether that's Empire, whatever your vice may be, you make time to watch that show an hour a week. You make time to get on social media for however long each week. So there is no excuse. You make time for what you want to do. So stop saying you don't have time and enabling yourself to continue to stagnate. You have time. You just choose to spend it on everything else. At the beginning of the day, we start out with a time bank, and we're all allotted. There is no one who is more rich in time or more poor in time than anyone else. Time is the one equalizer. Time equalizes us because we all have the same amount of time. So I start out with the same amount of seconds in the day as you do. I just choose to use them differently maybe than you do. And there are people who uses their time even better than I do, and they accomplish greater. So don't say that you don't have as much time. Don't say that you're too busy, because you have just as much time in your bank as I do. You have just as much time in your bank as Michael Jordan did, just as much time in your bank, as Beyonce does, just as much time in your bank as Jesus did, just as much time in your bank as Joyce Meyer does, just as much time in your bank as all these people, that have accomplished at a great rate. So we cannot continue to use the excuse that we don't have time, because we do, but we just choose to spend it on things that don't benefit us, or we choose to waste it on social media, or we choose to waste it on something else. Whatever it may be, we have the same amount of time as all of these people that we look up to. We just have to become wise and not allowing us to waste that time in distractions versus using that time for benefits. Whether the excuse is money. A lot of people say, well, I don't give to people right now because I don't have the money to. Well, you know what? If you have to be a good steward over the money you have now if you ever want to be entrusted with more. So what that means is you have to learn to give with what you have now. 10%, whether you have $100 or 10%, whether you have $100,000, is still 10%. So if that's tithing and it's 10%, I don't understand why you're going to be more able to give 10% when you have 100,000 than when you have 100. It's still 10%. It's not going up. Or if you cannot be a good steward over the money you already have and begin to give $5 now, if that's 5% of 100 versus, 5% of 1,000, if you can't even give 5% now, how are you going to get 5% when you get more? It's still 5%. So people spend their money on what they want to spend their money on. People spend their time on what they want to spend their time on. So we have to understand that it's a choice. So when people say they don't have the time or they don't have the money, I tell them, well, you're spending your money on something and you're spending your time on something. So what are you spending it on? Because you do have the time and you do have the money. People just choose to spend it the way they want to. So we have to really get rid of these excuses that we don't have time, we don't have the money, that we don't have the resources, that we don't have the ability. Whatever it is, you have it. It's just, how are you spending it? So we have to become a good steward of our time. We have to become a good steward of our money, and we have to stop lying to ourselves. An excuse is a lie that you tell to yourself. And the sad thing is that sometimes we tell ourselves so many lies that we actually begin to believe them as truths. Or we get so constantly used to telling other people lies that they become truth to us. We're constantly saying, one thing I hear so much throughout the day in conversation with people is, I'd like to, but I'm too busy. I don't have the time for this. I don't have the money for this. And that's a lie. You have to begin to understand that an excuse is a lie that you tell to yourself, and eventually you begin to believe it. And that more than anything or anyone who is able to hold you back in your life is you. So you have to stop enabling yourself to excuse yourself from doing what it is that you've been called to do and excusing yourself from being the person you were called to be. We've got to get rid of these excuses. And I am not, I'm speaking the same word to myself. I'm constantly looking at ways to be a better steward of my time, to be a better steward of my money, because we have to understand that we cannot continue to enable ourselves through our excuses, because excuses, at the end of an excuse, is nothing. So I hope you guys, I hope through today that you have really understood how distractions, keep us from becoming the fullness of who we were called to be. Distractions will keep you from being able to focus on God. Distractions will cause you to believe lies. Distractions will keep you from accomplishing at the rate that you were called to accomplish at. Distractions will keep you from walking in the fullness of success. So I hope you guys, are able to see even how distractions lie to you, and how distractions are oftentimes a choice, because we're choosing to place our focus on them rather than to place our focus on God, or to place our focus on our goals and what we've been called to be and the truth of who God has told us we are and who we are called to be. So, it is my dream, my desire, and my heart to empower and enable you to overcome every hindrance that would keep you from walking in the fullness of who God created you to be and what you were called to do. So I hope that this morning, you learned how distractions work, because if you understand the tactics of the enemy, then you're able to see the battle plan and stop it before you become a victim to it. If someone throws a ball at you and you see it coming, you're able to duck. If you don't see it coming, the ball's going to hit you. So it's my goal to be able to enable you to see the ways that the enemy comes in to distract you, so that you no longer have to fall unto the victimization of distraction. So you don't have to be a victim of distraction. You don't have to be a victim of excuses, and you don't have to be a victim of stagnation. So I hope you guys are feeling empowered to go forth today, to not be distracted, to not use excuses, and to accomplish at a very high rate. So thank you guys so much for joining today's Sunrise Scope about how to avoid failure. Tomorrow is Friday, and we have one more scope we're going to do on avoiding failure. I'll be praying for you guys throughout the day. If you joined on the replay, thanks for joining the replay. I love you guys. Thank you for the hearts. Thank you for inviting your followers. You guys are awesome. I look forward to, hanging out with you guys every morning and getting our day started right with right thoughts. My motto is this: every word you speak is first a thought before you speak it, and every action you commit is first a thought before you commit it. So if you can change your thoughts, you can change your life. And this is why I love wisdom. This is why I'm so passionate about wisdom. So if you're someone who wants to join a wise community, if you're someone who wants to change your thoughts today, if you go to my website, wisdomisthenewblack.com, I have a free 5-day negativity detox on there. You can begin to detoxify yourself from negative thoughts and begin to change your thoughts today, which will empower you to be a new person tomorrow. You can follow me on Facebook at Wisdom is the New Black. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Pinterest. Of course, I'm on Periscope. So I love you guys. I hope you are enjoying the community, and I hope you guys are enjoying, these wisdom bits that I share every morning. I hope it's really helping you to start your day off right. So, have a great day. I love you guys, and I will see you tomorrow for tomorrow's Sunrise Scope. And one more time, the website is wisdomisthenewblack.com. All right, have an awesome day, guys. Happy Thursday. Tomorrow is Friday, and I will see you for TGIF Friday. All right, love you guys. Bye.